Okay, so we're back again with another special guest. Let's start by introducing yourself. Tell me your name, your current job,
Okay.
how many years you have been in this job, and what is your favorite quote in education?
Okay. So I'm Felicia Bond. I am an assistant principal at Open Wells High School. This is my fourth year as an assistant principal. Prior to that, I was a speech pathologist. My favorite quote in education, I don't know. Probably it's, oh my goodness, I can't remember the exact wording of it, but like it's easier to build up strong boys than to fix broken men.
Frederick
Yes.
Douglass.
Yeah.
Frederick Douglass,
Yep.
absolutely. That's one of my favorite quotes. It's funny, one of your colleagues who I also interviewed, Mr. Brian Ringgold, he used that exact same quote. So, yes, so
It's a
powerful
popular
quote.
one.
So, what initially brought you into education? So, before we
It's a
even
big
get into
question.
assistant principal, what brought you into education?
So I was a print journalism major. And when I was in undergrad, I was essentially told that I was going to be super broke if I stayed there because it was a dying industry. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do? At the time, I was actually working in daycare. I worked with small kids. I had worked with kids pretty much my entire life. I ran like a little babysitting business with my sisters. And when I started to think about what else I could do, I was like, well, I'm working in daycare. I like kids. Like I could do something with that. And as part of one of our classes at Howard, we had to do it's called school seat orientation, where they talk about every single major in that school, and they talked about speech pathology. So I was like, well, that's kind of interesting. And for me, it was an opportunity where I could help other people tell their stories. I always wanted to be a storyteller, so that's why I wanted to be a journalist. And I was like, okay, well, I will help other people tell their stories, especially people who are having a hard time telling their stories. So that led me into speech pathology. Working the schools is just something that a lot of SLPs do. So I was working in schools. I've worked, with young kids, older kids, adults, and I found myself working in Howard County since like 2016, and I've been here ever since.
I find it very odd that you wanted to go into journalism and now I'm interviewing you and you don't want to do the interview.
I like being behind the camera.
Got it. So that's what brought you into
Mhm.
education. So now identify this is the education question, right?
Yeah.
Identify your why. Why do you continue to do what you do? Is it because of your deep love and passion? Is it the bills? What is it that brings you to
Definitely not the
school
bills.
every single day?
I'm really, really, really passionate about having voices in the room, and I think my background particularly is unique, especially as an administrator. And I feel like I've been able to bring that perspective into a lot of conversations. So for me, that's been my why of wanting to represent a different version of leadership, a different version of administrators that's typically not seen. And when it comes to working with kids, I had a lot of friends growing up who didn't make the best of choices. And unfortunately, I saw their lives go in a very different path than mine. Wanting to help and be a support and be an influence on other kids so that hopefully they can make some different choices and, have a life path that they're going to be proud of is what makes me want to keep doing what I'm doing.
Okay. So at some point for many educators, not all,
Mm-hmm.
but for many educators, there was a moment of where we fell in love with the profession, right?
Yeah.
Was there a moment? Has there been a moment? Was it maybe a year? Was it a group of kids? What was it? What made you be like, you know what? Either one, I love what I do, or if the love still hasn't there, what was the moment where you're like, I know what I'm doing?
It was definitely a student. It was a kid. His name was Dion. It was when I was in my first like real job. It was after I finished grad school. I was working in non-public, and he was just such a charismatic kid, but essentially he was functionally illiterate. He could not read at all. He really, really, really struggled, and that's kind of what landed him in non-public special education. And just seeing like how hard he was working, how as a team we were able to support him, and just kind of that connection that we all made and wanting to work together with him. I was like, I want to do this. I love this. And just seeing him when he did graduate, and then years later, even kind of reinforcing to me that like it made a difference. He has had a successful job since he graduated. He's gone on and like been a successful adult. And just feeling like I had a small piece of that has kind of always been a motivator and been really like the thing that's been like, this this is important to me.
Okay. On the flip side, because while we all fall in love with certain things at times, there are those days and there are those moments that challenge all of that. So what may have changed or challenged your love for education? Because we all go through this. We all go through this. So I don't necessarily need the stock answer, right?
I don't
But
know.
what has maybe challenged your love or maybe even doubted yourself?
I don't know if it really like changed my love for education and for like wanting to do the job, but it definitely made it harder. Over the years, I've lost several students for many, many different reasons. And every single time it makes it a challenge to just like stay present and engaged, because no matter what you've done, no matter how hard you've worked the job, no matter what you've put into it, sometimes you can't do anything to intervene in what happens in a child's life. And it's sad, it's hurtful. You know, talk to the families, or even you just find out after the fact that this happened with a student that you formerly worked with. So I think anytime that happens, it makes it feel like, oh, is this something that I can keep doing and keep experiencing like this kind of sadness?
Mhm. That's a challenge, right? Because unfortunately, the longer you stay in it, the more that's
Yeah,
unfortunately going to happen, right?
yeah, and
Even if it's just like one every 5 years or whatever,
yeah.
that's still a lot in itself.
It is, and I think because I spent so many years in non-public special education, kids were faced with a lot of challenges at a much higher intensity than you would see with kids typically in like comprehensive schools. So I think the frequency with which that would happen was much higher, especially with kids that I work with at the beginning of my career.
Gotcha. So, in your role, do you have a mentor that keeps you uplifted? If so, who are they and why are they your mentor?
I have two mentors, and one of them has been my mentor since I was 18. When I was at Howard, Dr. Harris, has been my mentor forever. Um, she pushed me to learn about assistive technology. She's guided me as a speech pathologist. She's just like a wonderful person, and she's been with Howard forever. She's a legend, so I love her. And then my other one is Tiffany Nunley. She's been like my advocate since I've been in Howard County. She's supported my growth. She's been a sounding board. She's just really been just a wonderful person to help guide my career.
Gotcha. So they keep you uplifted, and I guess this is why they've been your mentor even
Yeah.
now. Like, how often do you speak to either one of them?
Dr. Harris probably less now, but I still check in with her a couple of times a year, especially when different things are going on. I've checked in with her more recently because I'm working on my dissertation, and she's always been really pushing me to finish that. So I talked to her a little bit more about that. And Nunley probably at least once a week, if not more. It just depends on what's going on. If it's, especially at the beginning of the year with everything, just getting started, I talk to her a lot more, and then things get crazy, and then I'll go back to checking in. But definitely pretty frequently.
Okay, so think back to year one AP Felicia Bond, the
Okay.
first year of you as an assistant principal versus you as an assistant principal today.
Okay.
How has your work style evolved since your first year?
Okay. So my first year, when I got promoted, I had a 2-month-old. So, or 3-month-old. So I think very, very much like as a person, I was in survival mode. And I think I functioned that way in my first year as an AP, of just like trying to learn everything, get everything done, and just trying to make it through and learn the job, which was stressful on its own. But it's also being, at that point, being a new mom to a baby and already was a challenge. And I think now I feel a lot more confidence in like knowing what I'm doing. I feel that I definitely leave with more confidence than I did that first year, and I probably the first 2 years.
Gotcha. What's the biggest difference between you now versus when you first started in education? So you got to go back even further.
Okay, so started in education, like started in which part? When I was working in daycare, when I was working in preschool. I mean, I was a kid. I was a kid then. So, I mean, I was 19 when I started working with little kids. So, obviously, 19 to how old I am now is a big life difference.
19 to how old I am.
It's a big life difference. If I think back to like when I was like coming out of grad school and really starting my career as like an official speech pathologist, I think then it was still just like this hunger of like, I want to do everything. I want all of it. And I like wanted to specialize in this and get another certification in that and bounce everywhere and just do all of it. I think that over the years, I've become more intentional and more focused with my career and like knowing you don't have to do it all to be successful. Like you can specialize, you can, know what your path is. And you're not any less successful because you don't choose to do all of the paths.
We'll talk about success and failure in a minute, but
Okay.
that's a good point. But I think one of the big things in education is when you work with children, as beautiful as they are, children are oftentimes a pretty big mirror. And they, regardless if you want them to or not, they're going to show you who you are, good, bad, somewhere in the middle, right? What have you learned about yourself from working with children? What have you learned about yourself from working from the students?
I have learned that I am much more like structured and black and white than I thought I was. I think that is a safe space for me, but I never realized how much it was until I worked with kids who were like, why are you so strict on the rules? And I think I've always equated rules to consistency and to just keeping order. I'm trying to be more flexible.
I was just about to say, no, that's actually a good point though. Like, how do you feel about that with yourself?
I think it's a pro and a con. I think all strengths can also be weaknesses. I think I'm growing and learning to just have more room for gray, but also knowing that sometimes right is right and sometimes wrong is wrong. So I don't think you have to be either or, and I'm learning to exist somewhere in the middle of all
that. Interesting. All right. If you could think back over your years in education, what's a defining moment? So I need you to think of one moment, either in your role or just within education. I more so want to focus in on your role, but what's a defining moment that you'll never forget?
So this is a little bit before I became an administrator, but I think it is what opened the door a little bit. So I was a speech pathologist. I was doing a lot to support our life skills program. And I had worked summers a lot. I was a level leader for speech pathologists for high school. And the person who was running high school ESY was moving into a different role. So I was like, cool, I'm going to apply. I want to, try that opportunity. And the first time I applied, I didn't get the job. And what was told to me was that I didn't at that point have enough like leadership experience. And I was like, what? That's crazy. So what I did was I went back to my team and I was like, well, I need to do this to move forward. And I think I realized at that moment, like that's when that intentionality came into play, where it wasn't, I just couldn't just take what came and like let the opportunities come when they came. I had to make them and I had to like determine what that path was going to be. Because if I was going to move into leadership in the county, because I wasn't coming out of the classroom, I wasn't a traditional teacher who, that's typically who people are looking to for leaders. I almost had to like overprove that I belonged in those spaces. So I feel like for me, that was the defining moment of not getting that position and saying like, okay, well, how do I make this path happen for me? And that led into me leading the program, moving it. And ultimately, I feel like that's what opened the door for me to become an assistant principal.
So you learned a lot from rejection. Mm-hmm. So rejection is a
teacher, that's for sure.
We all hate it, but it's
important.
It's definitely a teacher. Definitely a teacher. Okay. So what value does an assistant principal actually bring to a school and to a community?
So that's a very hard question. Like what value do they bring?
Why do we need assistant principals?
I think it's a bigger question of why is there a team in administration and team in leadership? So I don't think it's necessarily just like why do we need an AP? I think you need a lot of perspective to make informed decisions, right? So as a principal, particularly as a principal in a high school where you're working with, 1,000 plus kids in any building, you're not going to know everything about everything that comes up, right? So you need voices, you need different perspectives that are going to know policy. You're going to need to know you're going to need people on your team who are more equity focused, people who are thinking about mental health, because all of those voices together allow you to make an informed decision that is thoughtful and intentional. And I think that benefits like not only the school as a whole, but it benefits the community because you're coming with like lots of information and just lots of well thought, well-informed people who can work together.
So let's say we have someone who's watching this or who's listening to this and just like, you know what, my dream, my goal is to become an assistant principal. I want to go ahead and be one of those individuals who has the information, the nuances, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
What should people know about your position of an assistant principal before going into it?
It's a lot of work.
If you can go back and talk to
young Felicia, oh God.
What would you tell somebody before going into your position?
You can't be ready for it. Like it is pieces of what you think it's going to be. It's a lot of work. And I think I underestimated the emotional toll that it would take, or the emotional labor that it is, because you are dealing with people's kids in a very different way than you were when I was a speech pathologist or when you're in a classroom or anything like that. Because in a lot of ways, we act as filters for information that comes in, for situations that are happening that may never make it to others in the school and should never make it to others in the school. But some of the weight of that is something I don't think anybody is really prepared for. And I don't think people talk a whole lot about it until you're in the role, and then you're like, wow, like these are heavy things that are being shared with me. So that's probably what I would tell you for me is like, it's not just the instructional leadership. It's not just being in the classrooms. It's being able to be an emotional support and an emotional filter for the building.
What do you think is the most rewarding part of your job?
Seeing students change over time. I mean, that's always been the reward as an SLP, as an AP, seeing that student growth from whether it's from 9th grade to senior year, or 6th grade to 8th grade, or whether, there's kids in the county who I worked with and they were in infants and toddlers or in Head Start, where they're, you see them and you worked with them, they were 4 and now they're in high school. Just seeing that change is amazing, because for a lot of kids, they just mature so much and you see so much potential in what they're going to do. You can see like all the amazing things they're going to do in the future, and just even feeling like, hey, I got to be a small part of that is great.
Do you feel like the most rewarding part of your job aligns with your why you do what you do?
Yeah, I think seeing that change, seeing that growth, seeing that potential definitely aligns with my why.
Okay. We were talking about this a few minutes ago. If you could, right, we don't have the type of job that does this, and this is very subjective, but if you could define success in your role, and if you could define failure in your role, what would that definition be? What is a success? What is a failure? This could change day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. However, right now, define success and define failure.
I think success in this role is a moving target for sure. I think what is success today? For today, it may just be, hey, I met with all the parents and I called everybody back that I needed to call back, and I made it in that classroom and I did all the things that were on my list, and all that got done. I feel successful today. Overall, I think success in this role is just measured by your growth. I think if you're continuing to grow, continuing to challenge yourself and not getting comfortable, then you're being successful. Because as we know, working with kids change. Like culture changes, their needs change. We've seen, even just like, I hate bringing up COVID, but in this post-COVID world, like kids are different. Their needs have shifted a lot since before that time. And I think if you're adapting and growing and changing, then you're being successful in this role. I think kind of on the flip of that, what failure is being stagnant, being unwilling to like embrace new programs or consider, just alternative perspectives. I think that will set you up for failure in this role, because like, how can you not grow and change? You're literally working with people in the greatest stage of growth. So
interesting. Okay. I think and this is something that, I can leave in, take out, whatever it is, but it's like kind of going back to what you were saying, right? Of just like that black and white sometimes could block that growth, right? So just as you were also saying, you're willing to accept a little more gray. We're willing to accept a little more gray as well. We're all growing. We're all growing, right? That's the beauty of all of this. All right. In your opinion, now I know you have a lot of thoughts on things.
I do.
In your opinion, what is the greatest challenge we face in education today?
Okay, as much as I love policy, I think policy is our greatest challenge because um, I think a lot of times it gets in the way of supporting families and kids in the way that you want to. But on the flip side, sometimes I think the lack of policies and procedures and things like that leave things too open and we're not able to do the things that we feel like we need to do. So I think that's probably the thing that drives me a little bit crazy.
Just policies?
Well, policies, rules, procedures. I mean, I come from the world of special ed, right? So for example, qualifying for an IEP, right? We might identify a student and we know that that student needs some supports, but they may not meet criteria to qualify. And because that rule is what the rule is, right? You can't give that student that avenue for support. So you're kind of bound by, hey, this is what the rules are. Same with like 504s and entry to programs. And I mean, within the county, we have programs like pathways, right? So there's this process and there's these procedures to get into it. But when we have a kid and we're like, hey, I know this kid would benefit from this kind of support, but maybe they have a diagnosis or something like that that doesn't allow them to participate. So it's like all of these rules and things like that, sometimes act as barriers. They can make the job challenging.
Sometimes their policies do make things more of a barrier, especially when we know, right?
Yeah.
Like I work with this kid. I know what
I
I'm
know
talking.
what
I'm not just trying to go after this kid. We know what we're talking about. But gotcha. Last question. Yeah. And this one to me is definitely one of the bigger ones because at some point or another, the beautiful thing about this job, just like any other job, is that at some point or another, we all call it quits, right? Yeah. Whether it be we just say this ain't for me, we move on to other career paths, maybe we retire, whatever it might be, right? Oh, we ain't close to it. No, I said at some point, this is what happens. So how would you like your students to remember you?
Students to remember me. I think as authentic. I think I want them to see me as someone who is who she is and who is comfortable in that. Because I think this is probably a much deeper answer than it needs to be, but whatever. I think as a Black woman in leadership, particularly in secondary leadership, there are fewer Black women in this field, particularly in this county, for students to see themselves in that role, right? So number one, I want students to see me through that lens, but also I think there's not one definition of Blackness. So I think for me, I want students to see like a different, like my version of what that is. That may not fit somebody else's definition or anything like that, but I want them to see that Black women, Black people come in different shades. They come with different mindsets. They speak in different ways. And that's good. That their variety is good, difference is good. And being authentic to who you are is important.
Gotcha. All right. Well, Ms. Bond, I appreciate your time.
Thank you
for sitting down with me.
I hate you on camera.
It wasn't so bad. It wasn't so bad, right? Just kidding. All right. Either way, thank you, Ms. Bond.